obviously you are the man when it comes to this. We've just put our draft issue to print, which basically is your entire issue. And I think interestingly, when we've had discussions over the years, I can't remember with Patrick Mahomes whether he ended up being the number one quarterback, but it was certainly in the conversation. And I feel like we have throughout the time we've done this not always necessarily agreed with convention, and that's the case in this issue as well. You have Tua Tagovailoa rated as your number one player in this draft. Just explain why.
I think a number of factors. Consistency. I think just being able to operate at the highest level, which he's done over a consistent period of time. Obviously, having the Alabama team around him helps, but people use that to knock him, and yet we're not doing the same conversation about Joe Burrow yet. He's got the best offensive line in the country. Jamar Chase won the Biletnikoff. Justin Jefferson's going to be a first-round pick. Terrace Marshall's a very good player. Thaddeus Moss is a really good college tight end. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a great running back. There's talent there with Joe Burrow as well. But I just think the traits that he brings to the game, he's 6 foot, and obviously convention has changed, as we've discussed many times with Drew Brees, with Russell Wilson. But in the last couple of years, certainly with Baker Mayfield, with Kyler Murray, the 6 foot quarterback, because of the way college football offenses are changing, is no longer the career doesn't end now when you get to the NFL if you're 6 foot. That 6'5", 225-pound quarterback thing that we always kind of grew up believing was the only way to be is now no more. And the accuracy, the field vision, the ability to manipulate defenders with his eyes. You go back to the national championship game that he won when he came off the bench to replace Jalen Hurts and his 41-yard touchdown. You look at the all-22 of that and see how he froze Dominic Sanders, the safety, just by manipulating the eyes. He knew Devonta Smith was over there. He knew he was getting open, but he just had to hold the safety and then rifle it in for the touchdown.
And that's rare in the NFL, isn't it? Never mind a true freshman walking into a national championship game, having really never been a starter never played outside of playing in the fourth quarter when games are out of hand.
Absolutely, and you go back to high school, and you can see him at the Elite 11, the highly rated high school seniors competition that Trent Dilfer runs, and you can see him doing that, using his eyes to manipulate players, to move them out of position so that he can then make often tight window throws, which he does. But just some of the things that you just can't teach, like I said, innate accuracy, the ability to manipulate the pocket, to use his footwork, to step up. And, I'm reminded I suppose, of Dan Marino, arguably the most unathletic quarterback that you would ever see, but his ability just to have a sixth sense in the pocket, just to step up, just to move left or right, to be able to avoid a pass rush, was never going to do it with his athletic talent, but was just to be able to do it in his mind, and that's what Tua has. And I think Gary Danielson, the CBS commentator, said something very apposite about him, which is that a lot of quarterbacks see fences, they see picket fences on the field. Tua just sees open spaces, and I think that's really true. And people will say, look, he's throwing to 4 first rounders, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, both will go in the first round this year. Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle will go in the first round next year if they're both healthy. And yeah, that helps, of course, but you still have to get the ball there. It still has to be on time. It still has to be perfectly in stride. And look, he's not throwing into massive windows. You go back and really study his throws, and I've seen every throw he's made at Alabama and a number of throws he's made at St. John's High School in Hawaii. And, he is making NFL throws in every game, and is doing it consistently to the level that you would like to see a franchise quarterback do. Interesting
you mentioned about Joe Burrow and his supporting cast, and that isn't a stick that's used to beat him, but one of the pieces we've got in Gridiron, as well as an exclusive interview with Tua this month, is another piece you've put together, which is all about the LSU draft class, and it's we think as many as 16 guys who could ultimately be drafted, which would set a record for players from a single school in a single year. So why do you think that is? Is it because, I guess, with Tua, it feels like the very best of the talent around him is condensed into areas to help him? That there are 4 first-round wide receivers, there are 2 probable first-round tackles. Is that the reason, do you think, or is it something different to that?
A little bit, I think, and I think part of it is the fact that Tua has been around for a while, and it's almost like there's been an expectation pretty much ever since he arrived at Alabama. He came with a high reputation, came off the fact that he'd won the Elite 11, and was kind of almost deified in a way when he got to Tuscaloosa, that he was going to be the guy. Obviously, then expectations go through the roof when he comes in, brings Alabama back from 20 to 20-7 down, whatever it was in that national championship game. Comes back and beats Georgia 26-23 on the game winner at the end of the game. Throws 3 touchdowns, including that incredible moment, that incredible sort of 40-second span where he's sacked by Lorenzo Carter on first down for a massive 16-yard loss. Gets into 2nd and 26 and rips the game winner. I mean, the expectations just go through the roof. And over the next 2 years, he puts together some of the most remarkable performances you've seen in college football. So I think part of it is that he's trying to live up to an expectation, and people have just said he's going to be great, he's going to be great, and people are kind of finding reasons to knock him. And in a way, Joe has come in and almost as the underdog, the guy that
Cinderella
couldn't
story
beat
a
out
little bit, isn't it?
a little bit. Couldn't beat out JT Barrett, couldn't beat out Dwayne Haskins at Ohio State, so transferred. Had a sort of an average year, and I know you were really high on him last year, one of the few people that were, and sort of picked it up down the stretch. Had a great game against Auburn, had a great game against UCF in the bowl game, but came into the season as sort of a late round free agent type quarterback, and then just turned in probably the greatest year in college football history in terms of quarterback performance. And it's sort of Johnny come lately, I think, with Joe. And look, I hate to say this, but I would suspect probably the colour of Tua's skin probably has something to do with it as well. Look where we're talking. With the greatest ruler in the world, I think black players, black quarterbacks are looked on as slightly lesser than white ones. I know that's probably a hipster thing to say, but I think it's probably true. But I think also you just take both of them actually, and you just look at the personalities they have. We talk about the on-field stuff. Let's talk about the off-field stuff. Both of them clean kids. Joe, just an incredible will to win. Same with Tua, incredible person, incredible personality. They're both guys that you would build and you would be comfortable building your franchise around, not just because of what they do on the field, but because of what they do off it and the fact that they're both leaders, both alpha males. I mean, part of the piece on Tua that I put in the magazine this month, 2 stories from a guy that works at Alabama, who said that when they lost to Auburn a couple of years ago. Went back into
This was before the national championship game.
This was before the
This is an amazing story, I must say.
Yeah, so they lost to Auburn, and it looked like not only were they not going to get into the SEC title game, but almost certainly not going to get into the college playoff. And it came down to that vote they got in. Ohio State were left out. And the Bama staffer said, you went back into that locker room, and it was Minka Fitzpatrick, Jalen Hurts, although Jalen was young but obviously still a leader. You had Jonah Williams, Bradley Bozeman, you had Calvin Ridley, Irv Smith, Quillen Williams, all those guys that were in there. The linebackers were Shannon, was Matt Wilson, all those guys that were in the locker room, Ronnie Harrison, all these big leaders. And my source was like, it was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop, but the only voice that you could hear was the backup true freshman quarterback going around to everybody and saying, "Come on, we've got this. Let's believe. Pick yourself up. Let's go again. And it was, and the staff was just like, people took notice. And then the week they got into the playoffs, and so the week before they played Clemson. Was it right? Yeah, they played Clemson in the semi.
Yeah, played Clemson in the semis that year.
So they played Clemson in the semi, and Jalen got the flu that week, and so it was literally a week of Tua, but actually, ironically, leading up to the Clemson game. And the staffer said it was the cleanest week of practice he'd ever seen in all his time at Alabama, and he's still there now. And it was just like, this is a true freshman kid who'd never started for the team before. And not only were they smooth on the field, but the mentality in the huddle, the leadership that he was showing. He said it was like he was a 4-year starter and that he was preparing for his final game, not a true freshman who was preparing for his first game. Which also just happened to be a college playoff semi-final against the defending national champions. So it was just, it was extraordinary to hear those sorts of tales. But they are not few and far between when you hear stories about Tua.
And I think that hits to me on the crux of how I view quarterbacks, and certainly in the time I've been evaluating. I'm interested to get your take on it because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. But ultimately, the reality for me with quarterbacks is I want to see that ability in the biggest moments, and whether there's a debate, are you elevating yourself or are you simply staying at a level when others fall apart in the moments of those magnitude? I would say for me with both Joe Burrow and Tua, actually, the separating factor with the pair of them. And another guy I'll put in the mix here is Jake Fromm as well, who I would say of the quarterbacks in the class, the 3 that I would pinpoint is when I've seen them consistently in those big moments needing to deliver, they've done it. Now I would say Tua and and Borough have done this at a higher level, which is why for me they're ranked higher. But how much do you put stock in that? Because I do feel generally like it translates, and we have seen Justin Herbert have opportunities in big games and consistently fail to take them. And I can think of other quarterbacks in college who were exactly like. I mean, Tom Brady's a great example. Late sixth round pick, had those comeback moments at Michigan in the senior season against Michigan State, good games against Ohio State, against Alabama, and it generally does translate, doesn't it? It's very rare that you see a guy fail to do that in college and then go into the NFL and suddenly acquire it. It is an innate skill that I'm not sure can be taught.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that really makes me nervous about Justin Herbert, who has a phenomenal skill set. He's a phenomenal physical specimen with a massive arm and is capable of, really, really incredible throws. But literally until his final game, he couldn't win a big game. You go back through his career, you look at the Stanford game 2 years ago. His first half against Stanford was one of the best first halves of football I've seen in a long time from a quarterback. Just throw after throw after throw, accurate back shoulder, tight window throws, NFL caliber throws from the short side to the long side of the field. So showing off that arm strength, running for first downs, all those sorts of things. Second half fell apart. Stanford came back, beat them in overtime. And really that final game, the Rose Bowl game, right at the end of the game 43 of his career, was the first real big game that you could say he'd actually won, and he didn't do it with his arm, he did it with his legs. That's the thing that concerns me. And I think if you look at Joe, Joe beat 7 top 10 teams this past year for LSU. You look at the games that there is nobody else that he could have beaten. Everett, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, it's all out there, Texas. He couldn't have done any more in terms of just being able to shine brightest in the big moments. Same with Tua. You look at the comeback game from the injury against LSU. They were down. He was the guy that was bringing them right back. He was the guy that kept them in the game.
Yeah.
Stepping up in that national championship game. Even the national championship game against Clemson, where he didn't play amazingly well. And they ended up losing in Trevor Lawrence's first season. But, he still was making, you go back and if you watch that game in its entirety, you go back and you look at some of the throws that he made, given as well the fact that 3 weeks earlier, he was at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. He was on a push cart, where his knee was balanced on the cart and he was pushing it along. There's the throw that he makes where he rolls out to the left-hand side and throws back against his body down the sideline to Jerry Jeudy. And you just think, I have no idea. That's just a God-given innate ability to do that. But I completely agree. And look, there's always going to be outliers. Carson Wentz, North Dakota State, comparatively speaking, wasn't playing in 100 against, Alabama against 110,000 people at Bryant-Denny. He wasn't playing in national championship games.
He still won big games in his own. It wasn't 100,000 people, but North Dakota State were winning national championships in their own, level of competition.
But just to be able to do that, to be able to get across the line in big, important games when the spotlight is upon you, that's really important, I think, and I know that for evaluators that's very important as well.